so this is an extraordinary little piece here by Gail Seres-Woolfson. So tell me about this lovely piece.
So I would describe myself as a collage artist.
Okay, cool.
In my practice, particularly, I'm interested in exploring architecture, space, and the experience of moving through the city. And I've got quite a particular process. It's sort of an interplay between rigorous interventions in a way, such as sort of rotation. So when I make a piece, I rotate my panel as I go.
You rotate this as you go?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it on like a spinny rotation thing?
Oh, that would be nice. No, it's not. But I was going to say certain interventions, and then chance plays a big part in things too. So here you've got a whole mixture of materials. So you've got fragmentations of bits of my photography, so just iPhone snaps of the city.
Okay, nice.
So I'm constantly finding things that excite me out and about.
Yeah,
I'll have them printed out, and often even bits cut out already. And when I start a piece, I've essentially got no idea what I'm trying to make. There's no formal planning that goes on. Instead, I'll just begin by putting a particular element on my surface, or perhaps from looking at my references, drawing some lines that fit with what I'm seeing, and then responding to that. So sometimes there's some completely chance marks in the beginning, but very, very quickly I find that I'm able to kind of present illusory spaces. So just using perspective, I can kind of open and close things, and that gives me things to kind of respond to. So I do lots of layering using tape. I test things out with tape often, paint things in, stick things on, cover things up, reveal, conceal. And then, as I say, because, I mean, compositionally it helps to rotate, because the work is it is abstracted, and there's no single one point of resolution. You know, I'm interested in all the possibility that comes with making a piece. So when I rotate, it just helps me see the work afresh and get ideas of balance. Also, the phone is really important to what I do. Not only am I using the snaps that I've taken of the city, but when I'm making a piece, I mean, this is a pretty small piece for me, but the work in scale differs from sort of A6 tiny to maybe 2 meters 50 by 2 meters 50. The process is the same, but when you're working that large, for example, it's so hard to get a sense of the overall. So by photographing it and seeing that reduced to a thumbnail or reduced on the screen, you get a much better sense of the overall. But also then, by the time a work is finished, I've got hundreds of images of everything that went along the way, and you've got all of these images which no longer exist to be seen, but it's sort of creating the history of the painting, and I feel like it relates to the history of the city. So you've got this mixture of new and old, and the stories of everything that you're kind of seeing around. So I'm interested to make something that kind of feels familiar, and there are, this is a building that I photographed in Moorgate, for example, but also a sense of kind of the extraordinary, this sense of kind of openness and multiplicity, possibility.
It's kind of weird because this building here, I keep thinking it's a filing cabinet.
That's funny. I see it as a phone box. Of course, it's just a fragment of something, and I've turned it on its side. But I like that. I like the fact that people see different things within the work. Sometimes I put down a blue shape, and people say, "Oh, is that the Shard?" And the answer is no. But I love that inference. Or is it a swimming pool? Or is it a puddle? I like the fact that the viewer brings their experience of the city to the work as well.
So when you're putting it together, are you using quite traditional kind of compositional theories?
So as I say, I mean, rotation plays a big part in things. Iteration, repetition, mirroring, but then also just literal playing. I like the interplay of things that feel solid and stable, maybe pointed to with the geometry, and then the fluid, the flux, the transient. So it is the interplay, so these morphing marks and things that kind of dissipate. I like as well when you look at the work, sometimes it feels very obvious there are these kind of clearly defined spaces, and then the more you look, the more those spaces almost collapse in on themselves, maybe Escher style,
it's weird, like this one here, it sort of walks up and down and here, and you go in a weird, freaky loop.
Exactly. So what I've started doing actually is putting together all of the photography of it in progress, and then making little films on my Instagram feed, so you can kind of see all the iterations and everything that kind of is embedded and not visible at the end. Because it could have gone anywhere. I get to a point through intuition that feels like a good place to stop, a point of resolution, but certainly it's not the only point of resolution.
It's not the only point of resolution,
there are many, absolutely. And in terms of kind of the material as well, so I work on board just because I like. So it's got a clear primer on it. I like the fact fact that that mid-tone brown seems to relate to brick brown, or you know, mid-tone grey relating to pavements and steel. And then you get these pops of colour, these disruptions, these surges. Obviously when you're in the landscape, you might get the flash of a cyclist vest, or you might get a billboard. So it's all about contrast and tension, I guess, and juxtaposition of these different elements.
And I mean, this then it's almost like a window, and that's almost like a railing, I suppose.
Exactly. So there are certain motifs that come back a lot. So things like railings, windows, doorways, because we see them simply through a very, very minimal shape. We're interpreting that as a window or a door. It doesn't take much. I really enjoy that. But this particular red shape is actually quite poignant because it's become, I mean, the red square has almost become a bit of a returning motif. This piece has become a jumping off point to work with a team of multidisciplinary artists. Ultimately, the aspiration is to create a performance piece for a live audience. So this has actually been formulated in steel. It's 2 meters 40 tall. And we've started playing in a space with a combination of sort of set, props, moving people, so people become moving forms, projection, static and moving. And that's the aspiration, but it's really exciting, I think, to take the ideas behind the 2D paintings, where I'm just playing with illusory depth, and then move that into physical space and respond to a literal architectural space. So it's complicated when you've got logistics involved, but also it's hugely exciting to have that collaboration. And I think also it relates to the kinds of artists that I admire. So I really admire people like Robert Rauschenberg, who was massive on collaboration, working with Les Cunningham, working with Trisha Brown, moving between art and dance movement. He worked with also John Cage, so the sound element. Those are things that really excite me. Iteration, the everyday, just I'm quite lo-fi, low-tech, and there's lots of sort of everyday materials here, tape, everything's a bit dirty as well, relating to kind of the griminess of the city. I guess, I've created a practice that's quite enjoyable in a way, because nothing's too precise and it's quite open. And, you know, I always say if you make a mistake, it doesn't matter with collage. You cover things up, you keep going, and it all adds to the richness of kind of the overall texture of the piece.
So would you say it has a kind of cubist-y thing to it? Is it meant to be a sense of walking through the city in a kind of way like that,
so
or not?
I'm definitely influenced by the cubists as well, also the precissionists, so the American artists of kind of the 30s, 40s, people like Stuart Davis, Charles Sheeler, who were really attracted to bold geometric lines, flattening of form as well. With cubism, I mean, multi-perspective is important. I've talked about multiplicity, so I'm using many different materials, but also absolutely I'm playing with perspective all the time. I mean, the whole thing is completely skewed. It's not as you would see it. I'm interested in heightening the dynamics of space, increasing the angles, and pulling you in and out of absolutely environments. I'm hoping that the viewer gets that feeling of moving in and out of spaces.
So it's not really meant to be like a sense of walking through the city. You're more meant to be pulled in and out of the so you're more working within the space in this picture. I
guess so, and actually in a moment we're going to see my installation upstairs, and that kind of explains this a little bit more. I'm interested, as you say, of the viewer moving in and out. I think when it's a large work, maybe, so I've made a commission, for example, which was 4 meters wide, and the viewer did have to literally walk down, I suppose, to experience it as well. Cool, but I think rhythm is the most important thing. So I'm interested to create something that feels pulsing, that gives you that sense of movement, whether you're physically moving or not. And in the installation, you don't necessarily need to be walking around. I'm interested in what happens when you sit still and these different elements kind of come to you, envelop you. But I'd say rhythm is important. My first love in life is dance. So, you know, when I see a space, I want to experience that space in my body. I want to kind of move through it, walk through it. And I guess I'm having fun on a 2D surface, creating rhythm, syncopations, and that feeling of movement also through the rotation. Through the rotation. Yeah. Interesting. Well, let's go and see the installation. Come on, everybody. Diverted traffic. Okay, so this is the installation, which is not what I expected at all. Oh, good. It's a bit like the paintings, but also not quite like the paintings. It's quite weird, actually. So tell us about the installation. So this was called Pink City, and I mean, I'm just so excited to have this opportunity to present it in this way. Pink City began as a video piece, which you're seeing here projected. So this is 4 minutes long, and we've got it looped within the installation. And when Alex invited me to be part of the show, he mentioned the space and said they'd be really pleased to show the video piece, but did I want to present it within an installation? And the answer to that is definitely yes. Absolutely, yeah. So what we've got here is the 4 minute film. Also, there's a painting, which the camera's going to zoom in on, which is placed within this context, slightly on a skew as part of this canvas.
Oh,
but
so
ordinarily,
so you've inserted that painting into the bottom left-hand corner of the back of the canvas.
So ordinarily that would
Nice.
sit as a standalone piece upright.
Okay.
And this was made before the film. So the film came about because I'd started working with a wonderful team, predominantly students from Guildhall School of Music and Drama, from their production arts departments.
Okay.
And we'd started playing around in their black box studio space
Fun.
looking at what we could do with projection, geometric props, moving people, taking the ideas behind the paintings, but taking it into 4D space.
Okay.
And I was talking about that project to David Rosenberg, whose gallery is called Velarose, and it's right next to Barbican Station, and just a sort of 10-minute walk from Guildhall School.
Nice.
And he said, "Oh, this sounds really exciting. Why don't you guys come and take over the gallery for 3 days and see what you can produce here?"
Check it out. Cool.
And he's got a very interesting space. Because he's an architect, the space is bespoke, and it's a long, narrow space that you access from the pavement. And it has a bright pink door, which you're seeing.
Which is there,
Right there. And the gallery permanently has pink carpet on the ceiling.
Oh, really?
Which you're seeing there, which of course for me, someone that likes rotation, I mean that could not be more exciting. But also the gallery has ply panels going down both sides, and those panels have hinges, so he can hinge them at 90 degrees to increase his wall space.
Oh, of course,
But for my purposes, I discovered actually we could swing those doors and hit them with projection, and that swinging element
quite cool.
did wonderful things in terms of distortion.
Oh, it would, and rotation,
and rotation and layering.
Your favourite kind of thing.
So I made this piece, which is using imagery that I'd taken snaps and moving imagery as well around the gallery area, so around kind of Smithfield, Barbican, around there, and was playing around with certain shapes and forms. And at the time that I made this piece, I thought that the video piece we were going to make might end up being quite humorous. In the end, that's not quite what happened, which is totally fine. But there was, you can see some playful elements. Because the gallery is quite playful in the way that it's designed. And I made some thumbnail drawings as well, which actually aren't on display here. Perhaps they should have been. And then from those, lovely Grace at Guildhall made me the geometric props. So
cool.
Grace finds here and behind you, and a larger version of the pink shape that's on the wall. And we took we took those into the gallery space along with found objects. So, for example, somebody had left a whole load of ceiling tiles on the pavement, and they were brilliant. They appear in the film as a projection surface. At some point, I'll point them out. And we had these 3 days playing with the space, and Jack, as amazing camera operator, he filmed everything for us. And then after that, I took all the material away and I had to learn how to edit. So I'd never worked with film before, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And using free software, it was helpful in the end that I've got limited expertise, I think, because I think the everyday, the low fineness kind of really comes into play.
Nice.
But also I couldn't articulate to anybody else what I wanted in an edit, because the point was I didn't know. You know, my work's all about, I guess, chance connections, and it was only in layering things up and cutting things out of imagery and laying static imagery on top of moving imagery that the piece kind of began to find itself, and I was really excited by that. And in the film there's lots of moments, hopefully, where there are inferences or things that open to interpretation, but the swinging doors definitely play a really big part in things. And then there was also lots of amazing static photography that came out of the project. So Josh Collins at Guildhall, he photographed lots of lovely things for me, and some of that static imagery then this year I used to make the series of collages that are behind you. So those collages are made with the memory of the film, with some static imagery, my photography, and also some moments of Josh's photography, and then embedded in abstraction and playfulness, and creating a new series. So this is the Pink City Collage series.
Nice.
So I like the fact with my work, nothing's ever the end. You know, one thing comes back on another. Everything kind of comes full circle. Yeah. But also with the space, with the installation. So we've got found objects in the middle of the room. So my studio's, I'm surrounded by lots of other artists as well, and people are often just leaving things outside their door, you know, discarded objects. And this, I like, again, the inference to a street sign in the middle. And I love the fact if you stand in the doorway, hopefully you kind of get, if we talk about movement, you know, you might follow the red line, you can see the cable disappears into the static imagery there, the line continues, but then you kind of come up onto the found object, then you come down a 3D leg,
Yeah.
and then onto a 2D black line, which takes
Yeah,
you up the yellow line, into the
there.
canvas, into the film. And actually, talking of the canvas, so there's actually a round window that this
Oh,
canvas
yeah,
is
you're
covering.
right. It covers it,
So
doesn't
I
it?
love the fact that I was able to respond to a literal architectural space and
yeah.
manipulate that as well. And even the radiator, for example, just putting two canvases in front of it, it kind of becomes something else.
Oh, that was clever.
Yeah,
That's nice.
so it's all very lo-fi. It's all
Yeah, yeah.
kind of, it was a case of doing a lot of running around, bringing everything into the space and letting the installation find itself. Yeah.
I keep thinking I'm going to fall over this black
No.
line.
No, I think
It feels
it's
like
nice.
it feels like it's higher than
Yeah, people have kind of commented that they feel a little bit kind of spaced out coming in here, which I think is interesting. The couch is here, so you can sit down.
You can sit,
but it's
feel
quite
dizzy.
warm from all the projectors.
Yeah, yeah,
Obviously,
yeah,
you've
yeah.
got the pulse and the sound, which is quite
Yeah.
important. This idea of, as I say, the kind of the shifting space. But I'm trying to make a space that you do feel happy to kind of stay in, and it's not abrasive in any way.
No,
It's
I
sort
don't
of
find it disturbing. It's quite intriguing.
yeah, you kind of get lost in it, and kind of you can kind of wonder.
And I like the shadows of the 3D objects. They're cool, aren't
So
they?
shadows are super important. I really admire, for example, Kiriko and
Yeah,
his
yeah.
work with these strange spaces. Again, always weird use of scale, weird use of perspective,
Yeah.
and the shadows play a really important part in that. So yeah, that's and actually it's nice. I was reading an article about Kiriko seeming very relevant at the moment during lockdown of our streets that are very much deserted.
Yeah. That's
And it's quite interesting, yeah, when you're playing with scale, those kind of things play a part. But yeah, no, I'm very excited how it's come out, and even the black beams are able to.
You don't know whether or not they're part of it or not.
Exactly, interplay. So the Pink City project it's lovely. It's gone from being something that was a video piece to an installation to a collage series. And then, as I say, the next step, hopefully, is to be able to present something for a live audience, going back to the painting downstairs urban counter with the big red square.
And we have the films in the live performance as well.
Exactly, the projection's super important, and this
Yeah,
interplay of interior exterior. So I think the static and moving image projection has become essential, really, to this idea of you sitting down as a viewer and being presented with a whole range of things, both which are physical in space and digital and zoomed in and zoomed out.
Yeah. That would be kind of cool, actually.
I hope
Nice.
so. You will get an invitation if and when it happens. I hope it won't be too long.
All you need is the Velvet Underground playing in the background.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it all becomes part of a collaborative thing. I mean, I think that's what artwork's about, isn't it? It's about finding connections, visual connections, but also connections with people. So I love these dialogues that happen
they're
with
fun, aren't
people that see things in the work and share my excitement for angles, uprights, possibility of encounter.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I've loved looking at it. I love all the rotation stuff and all that kind of thing. I like all the cubisty thing. But I mean, I'm interested in a way. It's interesting to kind of find that you're really trying to play with this. It's not quite a cubist thing in a way, because the cubist is more like a way of experiencing the world and trying to get a painting not to be flat. But what you're doing is you're trying to take the viewer on a journey into space and play with them in that way. So it's quite interesting to kind of refine what you're
exactly. I
trying to
think
do.
my first love in life is dance, and just that experience of sitting in an auditorium and watching, whether it's dance, whether it's opera. So I previously worked in the arts, in project management, and the number of times you sit in an auditorium and there's this sense of duration. The lights go down and there's half an hour or an hour where something reveals itself on stage, which is both real, literal, because there are real people doing real things, but it's also art, and it's not real, and it's this tension, and it puts you in a place where you can kind of relax into it, and sometimes you're fully engaged, and sometimes, think in a classical concert, sometimes your mind kind of wanders a little bit, and it's that excitement, that heady dislocation, and I'm really interested to explore that. It's kind of a dreamscape, and in my case it's a landscape, and it's theatrical.
It's interesting when you talk about performance as being half human and half not, because whenever I see ballet, it always really bothers me. Because they like wobble or move. I mean, they're humans doing these things, and they do it amazingly well. But it's not perfect, is it?
Oh, so ballet is my first love. So it's funny you should mention that. But I think there's ballet and there's ballet. There's all the very, very traditional ballet where it's very narrative-led and they're telling a story. But there's also more contemporary dance. So people that I really admire, for example, the Ballet Boys, George Piper dancers. I remember they did this amazing duet called Torsion. So it was two men. And they're sort of similar height, similar weight, and they were lifting each other in space, and there was a sense of suspension where they're hanging in the air, and then maybe a complete release, and they might fall. And just being completely enveloped in this thing. And there was also a clock that counted down, a digital clock, and you knew that when it got to the end, the performance was going to finish. And you were willing it not to end. But they had amazing soundscapes and amazing lighting by Michael Holt, you know, as part of their performance. And I think that's all played a really big part in what I'm doing. So it's nice that my former life, working in theatre, working in the arts, I worked for a long time for English National Opera, for South Bank Centre, all of that is kind of coming into the practice and fusing with the new interests. So yeah, it's nice to talk about the theatrical side.
Really cool, lovely, thank you very much. I really enjoyed hearing about it.
Fantastic,
Lovely.
thanks so much for visiting Pink City.
Cheers.
Bumbuckler.